What do you know? Broken.
What's happening, guys? Now this is a bit of a different one. Sorry about, well, everything. I've had a long week of post-production and editing and basically just stepped right into this. Now this is my underwater housing. It's the Sea&Sea housing for the Sony A7III, which I'm filming on now. This, my on and off button, has actually broken, and this is actually a pretty common problem, I believe, with some of these newer mirrorless Sea&Sea housings. But I can't find any information at all online on how to fix it without sending it off to Japan, and I can't send this off because if I send it off, I lose it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, and I need this for work. Well, today, in the post, I received a bunch of parts on how to fix this button. Well, I'm hoping this is going to be a tutorial on how to fix it, but, well, honestly, I'm not sure. I assume I'm going to need some mini screwdrivers. Yeah, right, so what we have looks like this little dial here. The shutter button does cover up the one screw we need to replace this over with. Actually looks pretty simple, to be honest. Yeah, because there's a hole in the bottom of this shutter button which fits the head of this screw. Oh no, we can sort of get that in. We have to angle this like inside the housing, through the hole in the shutter button, under the lock, and there we have it. Now I'm really hoping this doesn't affect the waterproof, because if it does, if any of these O-rings come out, I am totally screwed. I don't think much is happening. Absolutely nothing is happening. It's just not moving. Far out. It's genuinely like they've used Loctite. I can't touch it. Maybe if we try one of these. What's that? The zoom. If we try one of these, they're all so tight. None of these screws are moving. Right. This changes a lot. Yeah, I'm starting to wear that thread down. I'm a bit worried that if I wear that down, this is going to be a much larger operation. I'm thinking of maybe taking this shutter button out. I really don't want to have to do that, because that... we're going to do it. Far out. Whoever tightened these screws has a monster grip. Jesus Christ. That's the dome. I'm thinking this was a bad idea, but we're not going to stop now. We're halfway. We're halfway. We've taken the top off. I'm thinking I need a bigger screwdriver. The next 3 smallest screwdrivers I could find. Nah. Not a chance. Nah. None of these are going to work. They really have to be these real small micro ones. Ah! Come on. Should not be this hard to unscrew something. I can see the thread on here, look. Let's try to get rid of the shutter button. It's in the way. So I've just been on Wiki Answers to figure out how to get rid of a stuck screw. And it said to use a rubber band in between the screw and the screwdriver to increase grip. There's a tiny little screw and I've got a tiny little screwdriver underneath the shutter button, and you sort of got to go under the shutter button to get into the on and off button. But that screw is...
Alright, so you pop the little sticker out in the centre of the on-off switch head on the outside. There's a little sticker there.
Yep.
And then you can undo that nut and then push the control fully inside the housing and it comes out. Sometimes you've got to undo the shutter lever as well to get it out. But you need to be very careful. If you get that on that O-ring, it'll just turn that O-ring to absolute jelly.
That sounds way too hard. I thought this was going to be easy. Oi, mate.
Mate.
He's got to clean it up.
They're still around.
Why? No one. Who looks for a twisty?
But I just don't want them ever since I turned, 13.
So what he's doing is literally what I was doing earlier. He's just using the right screwdriver.
It just wants to strip. Oh no, it's fine. It's out.
You got it?
Yeah.
Mate, you are an actual lifesaver.
She's mad at you.
Oh, fuck. This is what we got. We've got the on and off switch with a little tiny O-ring and a hole in the top where the on and off button screws straight into that, something like this. And unfortunately this has come out, which now means we have to probably pressure test this housing. Don't take this out if you don't have to.
What I think's happened is that this part had actually slid up through the enclosure, so that when we were starting to screw the hole, it wouldn't actually catch that threaded hole on the inside because it was too far recessed. You probably could have held that down with a bit of pressure to make sure that that backside of that threaded hole wouldn't move when we were actually trying to screw this in.
There you have it. How not to service your own camera housing. All right, game changer. We figured something out here. We've been doing it wrong. So what we've got...
What I've discovered is that this plastic piece has quite a well-defined slot on the back edge, and that actually lines up perfectly with this beveled edge.
So this isn't actually a circle.
This has been machined to have two straight parallel edges that actually fit perfectly into that slot, so that this can't rotate once the screw's been put in place. So to put that together properly, we have to actually ensure that this piece is sitting at the right angle when we actually attach this piece to it, so that they can actually come together like this, and that the screw will actually catch inside that thread.
Alright, so we're back for day 2 of trying to fix this camera housing, and we've made a couple. I mean, honestly, you probably shouldn't be taking this out at all. If you do take this out, a number of things can go wrong. Luckily they haven't. The main one is that this O-ring right here can snap, but by the looks of it, this is actually in fairly good nick. There's still a little bit of silicone grease around it, which is real good. It means it hasn't dried up, hasn't cracked. So that's actually awesome. And I have spoken to a few people about this. I've called them up, and what we've done, it's not too bad. It's not ideal. It'd be better if that didn't move and stayed in there, but the fact that it's come out doesn't really impact us too much. Now, I've got a couple extra tools, courtesy of Mark, who's been a huge help in all of this. A correct fitting screwdriver, pretty important, no wonder we didn't get anywhere. Pair of tweezers to hold the screw in place. My little screwdriver with a magnet in case we need to hold that screw onto the driver, because previously it didn't actually, still doesn't. And some Loctite. This is for the end of the screw. To start off with, what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on cleaning this O-ring. Now, you should also clean the groove in the camera housing as well. So I can see in there's quite a bit of like silt. These are great, but I don't fully trust them. They can sometimes leave hairs and things. So once you've cleaned it out, I've got a lens cleaner, and I always use these as well. Now we're gonna move on to the actual button itself. And for this one, you're not gonna take this O-ring off. It's unusual to clean an O-ring, particularly the main one of the camera housing, without taking it off. But I have on good authority that 9 times out of 10, if you take one of these O-rings off, on these buttons here, what's gonna happen is this O-ring will split. There's a good chance if you touch it, move it, disturb it too much, it will break. So we're gonna be pretty careful about that and try and clean it without removing it. So I've got here an old toothbrush. So we're gonna use this toothbrush and just lightly brush around the O-ring and the edges, trying to remove any sand or silt. The O-ring's actually pretty clean, to be honest. I'm just gonna wet it up and try and get any remaining hairs or anything out of there. O-ring remover here, and I'm not going to remove the O-ring. I am just going to skirt around the inside of that top groove, extra stuff out of that groove, and try and clean it up as best I can before we put it back in. Now we just have to grease it up. So this is the Sea&Sea official grease that comes with your housing. You shouldn't use any other grease. I know there's mixed opinions about this. So tiny little dot. I've probably used too much silicone grease there, to be honest. But tiny little dot, and just rubbing that around the O-ring. And now I'm just gonna slot that through, not forcing it. Put it through nice and gently. We're in, we're spinning. We should be waterproof. So now that that's in there, we're onto the final part, putting that button back on. And now that we've figured out that it actually lines up, and that this end of the on and off button here, that this actually slots into the manufactured groove perfectly, it makes it quite a bit easier. So it's got two different sides here. It's got like a longer side without any grooves cut into it, and on this, that's on the left side, and then on the right side, it's got that sort of grooved look. That is just how it came out of the camera. So that's how we're going to put it back in. Again, lifting that shutter button up, and with your other finger, putting a little bit of pressure on that on and off button to stop it moving back out. We're going to try and get this behind the shutter button. When it's in line, I'm hoping we'll feel some sort of a click. I think we've got it. We're in. All right, look at that. So that's just sitting there with no screw in, but we do have to get that shutter button out of the way by the looks of it. It's probably easier if you had a second person here just to hold that button forwards, but what we can do is just maybe, if we remove this ring from the shutter, Jesus. I'm thinking if we get the spring out of the way, the shutter will just be able to sit forwards and not sit in our way too much. It didn't work. I'm going to try this without Loctite, just so we can get the system down. And once we've got that all down and working, we're going to go in for the Loctite and final blow. So we can get the screw in. And then this will go through the shutter button hole. Maybe a bit better with the smaller one. Just to start. It's not really lined up. What I am going to try, a little bit of duct tape over that on and off button. And actually over the shutter, that could work well. That did nothing at all. So if we can create a loop around the shutter to hold it forward. Alright, this is looking like it's going to work. Alright, so we just made like a little loop in the tape. That is holding the shutter forward. So now we just need to hold pressure on that top bit. Line the screw up. Going in, lined up. One hand back on that on and off button, it hasn't shifted, nice. The screw is screwing with the Loctite. We haven't hit anything else with it, I don't believe. Oh. I'm so relieved. We're not through the woods yet. I don't believe it. We've just done it. We've literally just done it, the whole thing. And I look up, and the camera is not recording. I never want to change another button in my entire life on this camera. But what we did, for the record, I was holding pressure on this to basically the on and off button from the top to stop it falling out the top. And then we lined up the on and off button, slotted it into place, and then with the screw, I practiced about 30 times trying to line that up underneath the trigger mechanism and get it lined up perfectly before I put any Loctite on it. Trying to get that screw underneath the shutter button and also all this other stuff here is so fiddly. So definitely practice with a pair of tweezers, lining that screw up under the mech. And once you think you've got it, put a dot, a tiny little dot of Loctite. I actually used the bad screwdriver just because it's smaller and can fit right inside the housing. Screwed that in, 1 or 2 screws just until I was confident that it wasn't going to come out. which is when I then used the proper screwdriver to screw that in. Oh, it works. Alright, look at that. Turns on. And we turn off. Oh, it has been almost 8 months. I have not been able to do that. Alright, so now I'm going to take this out, clean this O-ring properly because it is filthy. And then we're going to test it, just double check it's actually, you know, waterproof. Alright, we are looking pretty good. I don't see any water, I didn't see any bubbles or anything like that. Gonna leave it in there for another 5 and then we're gonna go for a dive and actually put this thing under a bit of pressure, but we got there. Okay. So we've just gotten out of the water from a quick free dive, not too deep, just to sort of test that the camera is waterproof under a little bit of pressure. Technically speaking, if it's gonna leak, the biggest pressure change is between 0 and about 5 meters. But yeah, so it's all good, waterproof. I didn't actually take the camera down in the housing just because, well, advice, if your camera housing is in need of work like this, I'd probably say don't do it. You've learnt from, from my mistakes and experience trying to change this that it's not quite as easy as it may seem. Hopefully if you do decide to go down this road and do it yourself, maybe you do have client work and things coming up soon and you can't just send it off to someone for 3 weeks like me. Maybe you've learned something about how it all works together, and I was going into this with no idea of basically anything. There's no information online how to do this, so I know this is a long one, but if you did learn something, good luck to you, I guess. If you did enjoy this, and if you are in a similar position in need to fix your housing or change a button or something like that, let me know down in the comments what happened to your camera and what you're gonna do about it. And if you do use this to fix your camera, well, I'd love to hear about it. Also, side note, this outside world today is absolutely disgusting. So we jumped in, it's just gross. And the visibility, if I stretched my hand out like this, I couldn't even see the camera housing. I could make out like a blurry shape, and then everything past the dome was just invisible. Absolutely disgusting. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I'm not gonna do any more of this, so subscribe, not for more. Yeah.